We've got holes in our sales process that need to get fixed. And all you would really do by going to invest more money into marketing and advertising to get more leads is light money on fire, because now you've just done all this work to go get more leads and spent all this money to only capture a minimal percent compared to where it could and should be. Hey, law firm owner, welcome to the Your Practice Mastered podcast. We're your hosts. I'm MPS.
And I'm Richard James. And MPS, today we've got a special episode where we're going to be talking about how to build a high-performing law firm sales team. Is that right?
We sure are. Look, if you want a consistent stream of new clients for your law firm, it all starts in your sales process. And don't worry, we're going to cover sales being a dirty word for you law firm owners that might believe so. But we've got to figure out how to take our prospects and turn them into paying clients. And look, if you're brand new around here, we just want to thank you for being here. We've got something we call the Gentleman's Agreement. If this isn't your first time listening or watching and you're excited to learn more, make sure to hit that subscribe or follow button, depending on where you're listening or watching, and make sure you tune in as we get ready to jump into this high-performing content. So, Rich, let's break this down a little bit. We talk about the concept of building a high-performing law firm sales team. Where do they start?
Well, first, I think they have to start with belief, right? So let me illustrate it with a story. So when I first got into this industry and I started working with a lawyer and he said, hey, you want to take all your crazy ideas and build a firm in Phoenix? I said, sure. They were doing $0. They literally had just started, and we grew it to $3.5 million in just a couple of years. And back then, that was a good story. I think we could do even better now with the institutional knowledge that we have. But at that point, that was a really good story. And people go, well, how did you do that? How'd you go from zero to hero so quickly? And the answer was sales, right? You know, everybody was advertising in the yellow pages. Yes, I'm dating myself a little bit. So it was the yellow pages. Everybody was advertising on Google. Everybody was using pay-per-click. Differentiation was difficult, but leads were coming in. And the question was, how did we take the leads and convert them when other firms were not paying attention to that? And the answer, MPS, is sales.
It is. But I want to cover something because a lot of law firms hear sales and think it's this icky word, right? That it's sales. They get that slimy feeling about it. But I need you to understand, and Zig Ziglar says this best, sales is not something we do to our prospects, I'm going to say here. It's something we do for our prospects. And what he's really trying to articulate there is sales should never be something we're doing to, like we're forcing our prospect into a decision that they shouldn't be making. That's not the right kind of sales, and that's certainly not what we're advocates for. It's something we're doing for our prospect. They're coming to you. Most of you are in practice areas where a prospect has a problem that they're experiencing, and they need to get that problem solved. And if you feel that your firm is the best firm to do that in your geographical location of the country, then I would go as far as saying we have an ethical responsibility to do what we can to help that prospect and to get them to retain the firm. Otherwise, what's going to happen? Either A, they're going to face the consequences of not taking action, or B, they're going to go retain your competitor. And if you feel you're the best firm to go ahead and help them, well, that's not a good feeling either. So we should try to make sure we can do all in our power the right way to get that prospect to retain the firm. Rich, would you agree with that?
I mean, I think you nailed it, right? So if there was an audience in front of me, I would say, so how many of you feel that you're really good at what you do? And they would raise their hand. They would say, they would think it in their head. And I'd be like, oh, how many think you're really the best at what you do? And they would think about it. And I'd be like, okay, how many believe that, like, if there's somebody who needs your services, that they should choose you over your competition? And they, you know, they're the ones that say yes. And of course, the ones who don't think that, I'm like, okay, you probably really need to rethink what you're doing for a living, because if you don't think you're the best, that's like a problem. So we're going to assume you think you're the best. And to your point, MPS, if they think they're the best and the client is going to get the best service through them and they're going to get the best likely outcome through them, then they have a responsibility to the client to make sure they hire them. They also have a responsibility to their company to make sure they hire them, because this is how we build a profitable company. And so, yeah, MPS, I think you nailed it. And so if we can get them there, so if they go, okay, Rich, all right, MPS, I got it. I believe. I've drank the Kool-Aid. I'm ready to admit that sales is the path to success. And so I've got to get that nailed. What if they think, well, yeah, but shouldn't I focus on like marketing and generating more leads first? I mean, what about that argument, MPS?
Well, it's an argument I hear time and time again, which is, well, no, I don't think you understand. What I really need is I need more leads, right? In reality, maybe you do need more leads. There's a world in which you do, but what I can tell you is most firms haven't optimized their sales process. And as a result, they've got all of these leads, even if that lead flow a lot is subjective to you. But you've got all of these leads and only a percentage of them are turning into paying clients. Well, what we should be seeing is 60 to 80%, depending on your practice area, of your initial consultations that show up turn into paying clients. That's what the numbers should be. And so if we're not there yet, and if we don't have somewhere between 65 and 85% of those prospects turning into a set appointment to even show up to a consultation, then we've got holes in our sales process that need to get fixed. And all you would really do by going to invest more money into marketing and advertising to get more leads is light money on fire, because now you've just done all this work to go get more leads and spent all this money to only capture a minimal percent compared to where it could and should be. Would you agree?
Yeah. No, I mean, you nailed it, right? So you said it best. If you might as well go ahead and take the pile of money you spend on marketing and take it out back and light it on fire. Because if you don't have the ability to convert those leads into sales, and of course, here's one of the challenges, right? When we say this, and you know this, a lot of attorneys automatically think, oh, well, look, if I get in front of them, they're going to buy, like they're going to retain the firm, right? Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I mean, geez, if I collected a penny every time I heard that, I would be a very, very, very wealthy jackpot over here. Yes, I've heard that all the time. It's either if they sit in front of me, I'm going to close them, or the automatic default percentage is 80%. 80% of the time, if
80%. So
they
they
sit,
think like they
yeah,
close.
I'm going to close them 80% of the time. Well, what we found to be true based off of the statistics we have is on average, an average law firm, when we first meet with them, an attorney that says that, they pull the stats or we pull the stats with them, and that percentage is actually 33.7%. That's the average close rate we see initially when we're meeting with a firm. So that brings up the question of, is it you, the attorney? Is it the process? Is it the structure? And the answer is it's probably a combination of all of the above. And so when we're starting to build out this concept of a high performing sales team, there's two fundamental places we need to start. You need to start with the who and the process. And I will tell you, the who in our perfect world is a non-attorney salesperson. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But many of you just heard that and you're wondering, like, could I even afford a non-attorney salesperson? Like, does that even make sense for my firm? And the answer is, well, we've got an easy way for you to find out. So you can go to yourprofitablelawfirm.com, and we've actually built a salesperson calculator to help you identify what a salesperson in your law firm should be paid and whether or not you can afford to make that decision. But we also have to talk about what that looks like in terms of building the right structure to see if the ROI would be there for you. But you could go to yourprofitablelawfirm.com to figure out if that makes sense. But Rich, we've got to start with this idea of who, and then we've got to start with this idea of structure. So why don't we just quickly talk about the who?
Yeah, if I may, just as a plus one to add on to what MPS said a little earlier, he found out that attorneys think they close at 80%, but we found the truth is they close at actually less than 40%. And so my challenge to you is, before you go into a doubting Thomas mode, measure your own close rate.
Right.
Like, just take a week or a month and mark down every time you and your team meets with somebody, and then mark down whether they retain you during that consultation. And then if they don't retain you during that consultation, do they retain you within that same period of time, that month period of time? Do they retain then? Do they come back and retain at that point? And measure your actual close rate. You will likely be surprised on what it actually is. And to just plus one on that one more time, Michael, whether we're talking to the law firm owner who is a small and solo, and it's just him and a receptionist like that helps him out part-time, or we're talking to a firm that has, 5 attorneys or 10 attorneys, and they've got a complete staff, and they're, on the road to $3, $4, $5 million. This is true in both of those scenarios.
Absolutely.
And so we find both firms don't measure their actual productivity and their close rate properly and regularly, and neither of them pay attention to the who, nor do they pay attention to the process. So now back to your question, you want to know a little bit about the who. Michael, what is the who from your perspective?
Yeah, so the who from my perspective, ideally in a perfect world is a non-attorney salesperson. But if that's not yet feasible, the who's got to be someone who can be dedicated to consults, but most importantly is willing to and can commit to following the structure that we'll talk about in a second. But here's what we found. What we found after measuring this across many firms is that non-attorney salespeople on average perform at better rates, close rate, than attorney salespeople. And the primary reason for that is non-attorney salespeople can't give legal advice. And because they can't give legal advice, it leaves them one option. That one option is they have to follow the structure. And because they have to follow the structure, now they are equipped to follow that structure and only that structure, work the prospect through and get the consultation closed. Never mind that, but also traditionally non-attorney salespeople have a sales mindset, which means they're traditionally better equipped with objection handling and being willing to invest the time to overcome objections. Whereas attorneys, you just weren't taught that. You weren't ever taught that in law school. So it's not a bad thing. It's just not necessarily innate. Whereas for a non-attorney salesperson, that's their career. That's what they do. And so they understand how to maneuver that and what that looks like. Rich, anything to plus one on?
Well, I don't want to create any wiggle room for anybody because you and I know the truth. And every client we work with that have fought us on this notion and said some version of, oh, how could a non-attorney sell my type of legal services? Like, high level sex offender cases, major criminal cases, high complicated divorce or immigration cases, bankruptcy cases, estate planning and asset protection cases. How could the non-attorney sell these highly, complicated case types? Don't they you have to ask real good quality questions, and you're going to have to give some legal advice during the process. And so for everybody who said that to us, and then was eventually willing to take the challenge, 100% of the time, they have determined that the non-attorney will close better. However, MPS, if they're still stuck on this and they really can't get over their own belief about that, or maybe they're concerned about their bar association and they haven't done the due diligence yet to determine if this was feasible for them, can they take the right system and structure and train attorneys to use it?
Excellent segue. Yes, they can. In fact, I would tell you 100% of those clients not only would say that the non-attorney closes at better rates, 100% of those clients would also say they can't imagine life without a non-attorney salesperson anymore and having to go back to doing that. So to answer that question, if you're in a position where a non-attorney there's that mental roadblock for you, fine. And you want to have attorneys run your consults. That's where non-attorney or attorney, it doesn't matter. They've got to follow a process. And when I say a process, that's not, hey, maybe touch on this, maybe touch on that, maybe touch on this. No, I mean a step-by-step structure, a step-by-step script that is used on every consultation, every single time, without fail. And as a result of doing that, guess what's going to happen? They're going to generate more consistent results in the consult room. What we always say is we're not trying to capture 100% of our prospects into paying clients. Not only do we likely not want that, it's just not likely going to be the case. And so many firms tell you to try to customize each consultation to try to accomplish just that, getting 100%. No, we want a black box structure, a set script that we're going to pass every person through every single time and consistently capture 60 to 80% of those prospects into paying clients. But the key word there is consistently. We're not looking for a swing and getting an 86% close rate one week and a 17% close rate the next. We're looking for 60 to 80%. And if we have an off week, we're at 62% rather than 73%, right? Consistency is what we're trying to strive for. Rich, would you agree?
Oh, yeah, 100%. The attorneys oftentimes think that the responsibility during the consultation is to give legal advice. In fact, especially the attorneys who charge for consults. Now, whether you should charge for consults or not is an entire other discussion that we're not going to get into today. But whether they charge for consults or not, attorneys believe that their job is to give legal advice. And they also believe that they're trying to close everybody, right? And salespeople actually think they're trying to close everybody too. And so what you just identified is, first of all, the rule during the consultation is that we're not there to give legal advice. As a matter of fact, we should never give legal advice during the
Correct.
initial consultation. And rather, listen, we don't want to suggest that legal advice shouldn't be given, but it should be given after the consultation is over, once the client retains the firm. The whole point of the initial consultation is for the client to retain the firm so that we can give them legal advice, right? And so if we do that, and then we move on to this premise that, well, first of all, we're not going to get everybody. Grandma used to say, Jesus couldn't get them all, neither will we, right? That's a true statement. And I would say, MPS, like, I think this is illustrated best when we wanted to prove this out. So you've always been a good salesperson. I'm a good salesperson. But at one point, we decided we really wanted to prove this work. So I kind of proved it when I built the law firm myself and I trained sales guys. But then you wanted to make it official and make it duplicatable. And so you're like, I'm going to go prove this. And you went and worked with a firm to prove this out. What did it look like for you? Did you try to close everybody? Did you assume you were going to close 100%? Did you alter or change your pitch to try to close everybody? What did it look like for you?
That's a great question. So I went into a bankruptcy firm with zero bankruptcy knowledge, to be clear. And I just followed the structure and script on every consultation. Now, being a highly competitive salesperson, yeah, absolutely. I wanted to close every single person I met with. Of course I did. But guess what? I didn't alter the way I ran a consult to do that. I followed the same set structure every single time and was a polite pit bull, I guess. I worked objections, right, in the right way. And when you work objections in the right way, good results happen. And as a result of that, during the COVID era and remote consultations, I was in a bankruptcy firm with zero knowledge. And within the first 2 weeks, we were closing at 84%, 84% consistently. And that happened throughout my time there. And it's because I was committed to the structure, committed to the process, and making sure I was doing what I can when it came to an objection handling standpoint. So, Rich, I think that structure is the absolute essential. And if there's one thing you took out of this over and above the belief and over and above the who, it's that you need a sales structure in place to allow yourself to start building a high performing sales team. I think there's so much more we can talk about on this when it comes to training, but why don't we just give them a quick, assuming they put those two things into play, what are some quick actionable things from an ongoing perspective once they've got a sales team?
So I think that's great. You're going to bifurcate this into people like they're just small and sold and they're trying to figure out how to close more deals, or they have a sales team, whether it's one salesperson, attorney or non-attorney, or they've got, 6 salespeople, attorney or non-attorneys that are closing deals, regardless of what it looks like. The first step I think that we talked about is let's get the truth. So let's first set the stage by knowing what the truth is. Where are we already converting at? Now, here's some of the numbers you're going to want to get a baseline. The first number you're going to want to get is what's your actual close rate, right? So it's the close rate. Just to be clear, the formula is really simple and it's math, but it's only arithmetic, folks. So don't get scared. So listen, the close rate is simple. It's the number of people that retain the firm divided by the number of people you meet with minus anybody who's not qualified, right? So it's only the close rate of the qualified folks, all right? So that's your close rate. The second number that you really want to start to understand is what is the client value? So how much are you selling it for? Now, if you're a contingency-based firm, this is a little less relevant, but in the fee-based firm, this is very relevant, right? So whether it's how much you're selling a retainer for, how much you're selling a flat fee for, you have to understand what that is. And then the third thing you really want to measure is how much are you receiving during that initial consultation as a down payment? And again, if you're a retainer firm, you're getting the initial retainer. If you're a flat fee firm, you're trying to maximize how much you're receiving as a down payment. If you can measure your baseline, understand what your close rate is, understand what your client value is that you're currently selling, understand how much money you're getting during the initial consultation, we now have a basis to work from. Would you agree with that, Michael?
I would. That gives you your starting foundation. And then once you've got your start, now you can build on it from there. So now you can figure out how you need to fine tune. And I will tell you from a high level, a few key things should happen once you've got your sales team in place, whether that's yourself as the attorney in a small and solo, or you've got an entire sales team of non-attorney salespeople. And that is a few things. First and foremost, you should always have some version of some consistent weekly training to make sure your sales team is getting coached and trained on a weekly basis. The second thing is you need to make sure you have an outlet every week for your team to be able to get questions answered. So whether that's on those training and coaching calls that you have, or you're just generally opening some time every week to be able to give your sales team an outlet to work through those questions, you need to have those two important meetings. But above all, one of the most important tools when it comes to accountability for your sales team is you need to have a scorecard. So we talk about a structure. Your scorecard should be that structure. So you should have that structure lined out in a scorecard that you can pull a consult recording and you can go through and listen to it and you can score it and identify how well the salesperson did following the structure and identify where there were some opportunities to improve in that. And all three of those things together are going to allow you to build a high-performing sales team that continues to perform. Because one important note is, it's one thing for you to hire a salesperson. They get up to speed really quickly. They follow the structure, and they're closing at 60-80%. Where most law firms fail is then they stop. So they stop right there, and they say, all right, cool, they're trained. Well, guess what salespeople do? Salespeople start to fall victim to their own vices, and they start to cut corners because they found out they can actually close if they skip this step and this step and this step. And then before you know it, that starts to happen. And little by little, they start to miss steps, but there's no training, there's no accountability, there's no inspection along the way. And then you look up and you ask yourself how a salesperson that was closing at 75% is now closing at 45%. And the answer to the question is you stop training. So training is something that always needs to exist in your law firm for your sales team. Rich, would you agree?
Yeah, and to just like to call out the elephant in the room, right? So maybe you're a lawyer and you're just realizing like, oh my gosh, I don't have this skill. I don't know what to do about this skill. And maybe you're wondering like, I didn't really want to know this skill. I didn't really want to have this skill. Like I just wanted to be a lawyer and I wanted to have my own firm. Or maybe you have a larger firm and you realize that, yeah, you run your firm, but you spend a lot of time in the legal world or maybe the marketing world, but you don't have that skill to run the sales team. One thing I want to mention is that that's what the game of business ownership is all about, right? At the end of the day, there are skills that are required to grow a business like a law firm, and the owner is required to either obtain those skills or hire somebody else who already has those skills, right? Those are one of the two options. And I prefer, as the owner, to at least get a solid basis of knowledge of what those skills are so I can recognize somebody else that I want to hire to do this, that they are also a skilled individual. Because if I don't know what a good one looks like, it's going to be really hard for me to hire somebody, right? So just as an overall statement, what MPS said is absolutely true. But it maybe bubbled something up for you going, oh, like, I don't know how to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't like doing that. And maybe that's true. I'm hoping it bubbled up for you. Oh, I don't know how to do that. But yeah, it makes sense. And if I want to grow my firm, I just need to get better at that. And if I just improve that skill, my firm becomes more valuable. Yeah, that's the answer we're looking for, right? That's the type of law firm owner that wins. The one that takes this perspective of, okay, I don't know this skill. I've never been taught how to do this in law school or anywhere else. And I've never been taught how to manage or run a sales team. And so what MPS just told me makes all the sense in the world. So I'm going to go to work at improving my skill set there. So that's a general overall concept, but I wanted to make sure it was inserted into this conversation because I do fully recognize after doing this for almost 15 years now, working with thousands of attorneys, I know that not all of you are matriculate towards this conversation. Some of you are repelled by this conversation, and I want you to know that that's okay. You can just go hire somebody to do this for you. But if you really want to learn it yourself, that's where the real win happens, when you want to start learning it yourself. MPS, I don't know if that was a tangent you wanted me to go down or not,
No, I
but
think
I felt it was necessary to say.
I think it's perfect, and I think it addresses you, the law firm owner, and meets you where you're at, because that's mainly the truth behind most of the law firm owners we meet with. So I think it was excellent. And look, if you're on the side where this attracted, and the idea of a non-attorney salesperson you're now salivating over, which I don't blame you, you can go to yourprofitablelawfirm.com. And again, you could go figure out if it makes sense and you can afford to bring on a non-attorney salesperson, and just get a feel for what the investment in that person is going to look like compensation wise. And that's yourprofitablelawfirm.com. But Rich, I think this was an excellent overview to give some tactical feedback on how to start building a high performing sales team to make sure they can get up and running and start that process. And I just want to thank the law firm owners that took the time to listen and hopefully got some value out of this. How about you, Rich?
Yeah, no, totally, MPS. And I think someday it's awful hard for us to cover in just a podcast episode all of the steps and minutia of the structure and how all this works. But hopefully we can give them an oversight and overview of what these steps can look and feel like someday, and make an episode about that. But for today, I think this was a fantastic first step. If you do what we told you to do, it'll give you a baseline to figure out where to go from. It'll give you an understanding of how to build out a training. And more importantly, it'll let you know the mental attitude you need to have to build a high performing sales team in your law firm.
Hey, thanks for listening. That's the pod. Make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button depending on where you're listening or watching.